Here today with our very special guest, Fleur Heazlewood of the Blueberry Institute. And Fleur is actually an incredible master of leadership, a mental health expert. She's a speaker, an award-winning author, and she has really important topics to discuss. Some of her books they're all about expertise and all around well-being and leadership. So that leads into a very important conversation that we're going to have today, which is essentially about beating burnout. Because when I talk to a lot of people in our aesthetic and beauty industry, we all talk about the effects of burnout, where we're our number one people that our clients always turn to when they have issues and problems, but who's actually looking after ourselves? So it's with great delight that I introduce you to Fleur this afternoon, and we're going to have a great, sort of a very necessary conversation, isn't it, Fleur, about beating burnout?
Absolutely. And I'm really pleased to be here, I guess, helping the well-being of the people that help our well-being. So thanks, Reika, for the invitation.
Pleasure. And you're the star of one of the beauty industry magazines, gracing the cover of Beauty NZ more recently as well. So you're no stranger to our industry. So thank you for joining us today on this this topic of burnout, Fleur. I guess there's a lot of talk about burnout at the moment, as I said, but let's start by defining, in your expertise, what burnout actually is.
I guess the first thing I'd like to share with everyone on our call today is that at the moment, burnout is really common. And so many of us can feel like a little bit isolated or wonder why everyone else seems to be coping when we're not. But the latest stats coming out of Australia show that close to 70% of people have been experiencing burnout in the last 20, in 2023 or in the last 12 months.
Did you say 70%?
Close to 70%,
Oh.
absolutely. And so one of the things that we know is it's something that's becoming more common, but also on the same token, most people actually don't really know what it is. So my wish for everybody on the call today is to help you understand what it is, what the components of burnout are, and what some of the small steps are that people can, take to start to alleviate it. So let's talk about what burnout really is, because a lot of people bandy around the term burnout when what they really mean is exhaustion. But burnout is actually more than exhaustion, and it is something that is work related. And so what we're talking about here is burnout is something where prolonged stress and strain at work is the main driver behind burnout. And I know for us in the health and beauty industry that we're working a lot of hours, we're putting a lot of energy out into supporting the people around us, but we're not necessarily bringing that energy back in again. So certainly in our caring professions, we know that we can be a little bit more susceptible for burnout. So there's actually three parts to burnout. That first part is exhaustion, but it's not just physical exhaustion. It includes like mental and emotional exhaustion as well. So that expression when we say we've got nothing left in the tank, it literally feels like we've got nothing left in the tank. We're almost flatlining. The second part of it, though, is we start to feel a sense of detachment or disengagement or disconnection. So we're losing our enthusiasm for our work. We're sort of like losing our passion for what we do. We're finding that we're less interested in our clients and what they've got to say. We're struggling to connect a bit with our staff anymore. So there's this real sense of disconnection or almost a disengagement from the things that we would usually enjoy, the people that we would usually care about, and the things that we're passionate about. And then the third part is we'll see a loss in productivity. And I know productivity is kind of like one of those academic kind of terms, but what we mean by a loss in productivity is it's taking us longer to get things done than it usually would. We're making silly mistakes. We might be forgetting things. We might be overbooking people. We might forget to, call someone in or schedule someone in. So burnout's actually a combination of all of those three things. Now, if we're starting to feel a bit wobbly in any one of those areas, it's starting to show us that maybe we're on a track towards burnout. But actual burnout is a combination of all three things. And
Yeah.
burnout, I was just going to say, burnout in of itself as well is not actually a mental illness. but it can sit alongside mental illness depending on how debilitating we're experiencing it, and it can become clinical. So if we're sort of like looking at it, like a mental wellbeing scale where we've got good wellbeing at one end and mental illness at the other, burnout can be a bit of a slippery slope in between, sort of like that mid-level right down to mental illness.
Yeah, I can really understand how it can be the start of something much more serious. And it's interesting because I typically myself, and it's probably quite common, as you say, would tend to think of burnout as exhaustion. But as you said there, you've got the disconnect, and sometimes I can, when I'm in that exhaustion phase, I know personally I have to really focus on what people are saying and really put myself in that moment. But what are some of the things, Fleur, that if you're experiencing sort of in that moment where you think, okay, bit of brain fog, it's taking me longer to do my tasks, feeling exhausted, I just have to watch junk TV at night. What are some of the if you're recognizing some of these things, hopefully before it's all built up and you've fallen in a heap and you're on that slippery slope, what are some of the things that you can do to help beat burnout or put yourself back on track?
So one of the challenges with burnout is that there isn't a one size fits all, but there are some sort of like strategy areas that you can turn to depending on how, I guess, debilitating you're experiencing it, and which one of those three areas is, I guess, what you're feeling the most. So, for example, for many people, the exhaustion will quite often come first. And so, if we're feeling exhausted, this is where we need to take some of those breaks for our own personal self care. And so, what we're talking about here is making sure that we're starting our days well. So, with good nutrition, good hydration, getting outside, getting some fresh air, taking a walk in natural sunlight to set our circadian rhythms and our melatonin and all those kind of like things, all of our, energy systems up to have a good day. It's
It
also
really is about a ritual, isn't it?
absolutely. So
No,
it's
and you're very good at doing that because I know you. And I follow you on Instagram, and you've always got beautiful sunrises and settings in nature, and it's so inspiring. And I love
uh,
to do it too, but sometimes I fall off. I fall off.
yeah, and it's very very easy to fall off the wagon. And yeah, so with my sunrise photos, for me, I find that the best time to invest in my energy is first thing in the morning before my day gets away from me. Because if we're relying on the end of the day to do our walk or to get into nature and do some of that reset stuff, and work gets busy, and let's face it, most of us, in small businesses and own our own businesses, there's always something that needs to be done or can be done, or something that hasn't been finished at the end of the day where we just
Anyway,
we're exactly right, where we just stay that little bit later. So for me, the best time to actually think about a self-care routine and do some of that nurturing, I guess what I would call it that nurturing maintenance, is first thing in the morning. The other thing that's really interesting is the research shows us that our willpower is highest first thing in the morning as well, because we don't yet have decision fatigue. We don't yet have the fatigue of having completed so many tasks along the way. And
do you
willpower
think
is
that
actually it's a muscle, it's a reservoir. So it actually does deplete over the course of the day.
it's a bit like charging your battery, isn't it? Get up, get the sunlight, charge the battery.
Absolutely, and that's a really helpful metaphor, because we also know that our batteries deplete over the course of the day, and especially all of us with iPhones, I'm sure with all the updates, right? They're giving us less and less battery life as we go through because they want us to buy a new phone. So if you think about the fact that if we're not charging ourselves each day, that our battery over time has less and less energy, and it takes so much more to charge. That's probably a really good metaphor for burnout as well. Because once we have started to drain our tank, it's going to take a lot more to put it back in again. So we're talking about setting ourselves and our days up well. We're also talking about looking at the structure of our day and making sure we've got some micro breaks. We know that after 60 to 90 minutes, our ability to concentrate has dropped. So even just a 5 or 10-minute break in between our client appointments, where we can put down what the client before us has been talking about, give ourselves a little bit of a reset, drink some water and start again is going to make a big difference to the energy that we end our day with.
I
And so
know
for
in
men,
our industry we joke about, not having the drink of water because, we'll have to run to the toilet and we don't have time for that in between clients. So, it is a challenge and something that possibly we need to change our own mindset around in practice.
absolutely. So a water break and a bathroom break is really important. So even just with your scheduling, if you can create yourself a 10-minute break, it's going to make a massive difference over whether you're going to be able to maintain that level of client service and that same level of client calendar bookings over time. So it's one of those things I describe as a false economy, like running from back to back to back to back to back over time is going to mean you're less able to be able to, maintain that same level of business and client care. So, for most of us, when we think about self-care, we're actually thinking about the massages and the facials and all the lovely things that we do in the beauty industry. But that's something that's just one part of our self-care routine. And as beauty therapists, it's just important, if not more important, that we're looking after our energy along the way. So I've talked a little bit about exercise and breaks, but it's also things like making sure that we're hydrating enough during the day. It's also about making sure that we're eating good things. And so if we know that we've got a busy day and it's going to be very difficult for us to have a glass of water, let alone get to the bathroom, it's even more important that the night before we're thinking about this and we're packing ourselves some nutritious food and snacks to eat along the way so that we don't end up eating junk and fueling ourselves with artificial sugar hits. So there's a lot of simple things that most of us sort of like fall out of or we don't think of as important when we take for granted our energy. So that's our first place to start when we feel that our energy is flagging. If we're so tired mentally that we're starting to disconnect or disengage, or we're getting a foggy brain, or we're in a place where we're feeling like more negative as opposed to positive, more irritated by small things that are going wrong as opposed to being able to sort of like roll with the flow and take them in our stride when we usually would, it's a good sign that we're sort of like struggling with our meaning and our purpose and our engagement and our energy, I guess, to be, happy and joyful and enjoying what we're doing.
Yeah, if you if
And
you if you don't have your why because you're burnt out, then everything else
yeah,
crumbles, doesn't it?
absolutely. And it doesn't mean you don't necessarily have your why anymore. It's just like you've lost your connection to it. It's like the why is there, but you don't
Yeah,
feel it anymore.
point.
Yeah, and so the big thing for us, and I know we, in the beauty industry, there's a huge why. We're here because we care about people, we care about beauty, and we want to make people's lives better. And if we're finding that we're losing that, then what's really important for us is to take some space and to reconnect with the things that we would usually love. And often when we are so exhausted and we're in the middle of this brain fog, we just go, oh my goodness, I've got nothing left in the tank. And so our initial tendency is actually to draw away from people, to withdraw and take a break from those things that we care about. Whereas what's really important for us is to actually lean back in again, step back in again, have the conversations that we need with the people who are passionate of things that we care about to reignite our own passion, which will then help us to find some balance back. So it's one of those counterintuitive, kind of things.
Definitely. And when you are in these phases of trying to get your reconnect to your why, often we will talk about some, the balance between work and life and those dynamics. How do boundaries and burnout all sort of tie into creating the perfect work-life balance, if you like?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So my starting place from this, and it's no secret to anyone who knows me, is that there is no such thing as work-life balance.
Okay.
So we talk about work-life balance a lot, and it's in the media a lot, but the reality is that it's all life, and that work is actually or should be just one appropriately, I guess, allocated piece of our life. So I like to think of life as a wheel where work is one part of it. And so often when we're losing our sense of why and our sense of purpose, it can be because work is starting to dominate our overall life pie. So most of us, if we think about what well-being is, if we think about what a good life is, it will include time for friends and for family and for activities that we enjoy, for replenishing activities, for managing our finances. And I tend to find that when we're starting to move into that burnout place, work has just taken on a way bigger proportion of life than it should be for what is going to be healthy for us. Another reason why I don't like work-life balance is because it implies that we're sitting on a set of scales where we've got work at one end and life at the other.
Mm.
And there's absolutely no way that we're ever going to be perfectly in balance. We're either going to like clunk on work or we're going to clunk on life. And I don't think that that's particularly healthy. It's not this all or nothing component. So when it comes to preventing burnout, so sort of like rewinding the clock and going, okay, let's do a reset and let's make sure that we don't slide into that burnout place in the first place. The first thing that's really important for all of us to do is actually to spend a little bit of time planning out what is ideal well-being for us. What is the best mix of all of these elements in our life that means we're going to be able to participate in life with full energy for work, but also full energy for the things that we care about, like our friends, our family, our exercise, nutrition, and all of those kinds of things. And so if we start from a place that says, this is what's important for me to have a healthy and happy life, we can then start to put some boundaries around those things. And so for me, I talk about the fact that beating burnout is about boundaries rather than balance. And so what we're talking about with boundaries is establishing your personal lines and limits in relation to the other commitments on your time. And so the key to success is actually first defining what's important to you.
Yeah, I really like how you talk about work life as a wheel, because I mean, to be honest, I think if we work full time, we do spend more time at work than we do at home. And it's a really interesting exercise to plot sort of, on that wheel where you are from a scale of 1 to 10 in work, in finance, in health, in social, in community, and sort of have a look at what's important to you in your wheel, and do that every couple of months to see how it moves.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not to say at different points that work isn't going to be a really big part of the wheel. It's just about acknowledging and like making the choice that, yes, for the next couple of months, work is going to be busy. So let me have a look at these other aspects of my life and work out which things I'm going to deprioritize for a period of time. Because I think where we really start to come unstuck is when we try and treat everything with equal priority, equal energy, and equal time, when we don't have infinite time and we don't have infinite energy. And so for us, beating burnout is about taking control of our time and making some choices. So if work's crazy for a couple of months, we'll go, okay, work's crazy. Here are some things that I'm going to put down for a couple of months, but I'm not going to let this get out of control and like run for the whole of the rest of the year. In 2 months' time, so on the 30th of May, I'm going to sit back down again with my wheel and look at what needs to change so that I can recalibrate and make sure that I'm doing what I need to hit what my priorities are at the moment.
And I like to think of it as actually life alignment. So yeah, I really like the scale thing, because it's not so much if one's out, the other's up or down. It's sort of, how can we get this nice line?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some
Yeah,
really
and alignment is a really good word, because what we're talking about, because everybody's definition of well-being and what is going to be good health, good energy, and good well-being is going to be different for everyone. And so the alignment is very much around what your values are and what's going on for you in your life, at a particular point in time.
because that will change, right? So
Yeah, exactly, because it'll change. And so what's important for you and what's going to work for you is going to be completely different for, me or someone else. And that's perfectly natural. And I think that's one of the challenges as well, I guess, with the, the rise of Instagram and all of our, health and wellbeing influencers. They're putting out there, here's the perfect routine. This is how I look amazing. This is how I keep my energy up and all the rest of it.
Mm.
But they're giving us a slice of often artificial life that may or may not work for them and doesn't necessarily naturally translate to somebody else.
Definitely. Fleur, it's a challenging sort of business environment at the moment. I think we think that we have to make use of every minute of the day, and sure we do, because we have to. We're trying to run a business that we're trying to make a profit. We're trying to be kind to everyone. We're trying to do good in community. What are some of the signs? Do you have any tools in your toolbox there where sort of if we're working in our business, we can start to look at things before they get to the point of scraping off the floor or people resigning or trying to take more medication or all sorts of things there. What is it that we can recognize when one of our team members is experiencing burnout?
Yeah, so one of our early warning signs that we might notice is when our team members, I guess, emotional reactions and behaviors are starting to change. So if we're seeing highly elevated responses,
Yeah.
so quick to tears, quick to sort of like snap, get a little bit snappy, being overly defensive over things, about getting cranky or not reacting well to requests when they usually would be much more even, is giving us some early warning signs, very much, particularly around that exhaustion perspective or that exhaustion part of burnout. If we're noticing that our team members are becoming more negative, it's sort of like, oh, you're always asking me to do this and nothing changes. Or, oh, do I have to deal with that client, again? Or I don't see why it's always my job to take the bins out. Or can't somebody else do this? Or, when we're talking about sort of like that, an excess of negativity or cynicism, and they're finding it really, really difficult to find the positive or put a positive spin forward, or even to ask for help when they're struggling a little bit, those clues are starting to give us some tips that they're starting to detach or disengage. So they're finding it difficult to sort of like engage in and think through and, connect to the purpose of what their role is and how they're trying to, help you and help clients.
You really have to keep your sort of as a leader, you really have to um keep a big eye out, don't you? Because in that instance, your team members could be kind of brushing it under the table and almost leading you to believe that things are okay and everything's great in life because they don't have the energy or the willpower or the desire to actually talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the third part of that as well is, around, I guess, their productivity or their performance. And so what we're talking about here is our staff's starting to become a bit forgetful over little things. It might be taking them longer to do a treatment because cognitively they're slowing down and they're finding it a bit more difficult to work through the steps. It might look like mistakes, silly mistakes, or it might be forgetting basic components of a treatment. So not even just, not even doing something in relation to it. It might look like, running late or running overtime. So all of these like small things, can add up and start giving us some clues that they're struggling, they're finding it difficult to perform things in the way that they usually would, to the quality that they usually would. And so we've actually got three areas where there's a lot of small signs that that are starting to add up. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do as leaders is when you start to notice these signs, so catching it at the beginning, start the conversation and say, hey, Reika, I've noticed that you're not your usual self. You're a little bit quiet. You're a little bit, tired. I'm concerned, about you. How are things going for you? What can we do to give you some help at the moment?
Yeah, they're really good openers, because sometimes it's just hard to, you don't know what to say. You don't want to, if you see someone who you are worried about, you don't want to make it worse. So just a little opener like that can be gold.
Absolutely. And I guess what's really important here is to come from a place of care. And
Mhm.
even if there are performance issues, sometimes there will be performance issues, sometimes they won't be so great. But even if there are performance issues that you need to address, separate the caring conversation from the performance conversation. So the key point is to let your staff member know that you've noticed that they're not their usual self, that you're concerned that there's something wrong and you want to help them. Doesn't mean that you don't address the performance issues or the performance challenges. You just don't do them in that conversation. Rome wasn't built in a night. We don't have to kind of solve for everything in one conversation, which is
Mm.
generally what we want to do because we want to be efficient, get these things knocked off as possible. But being
Yeah,
efficient is not being effective in this. So
yeah, yeah.
we tune into what's going on for our staff member and work out for a care plan for them.
Mm.
Then when we've got some kind of a care plan in place, we can then circle back and say, hey, now that we've got some things in place to make sure that you are well, let's now look at what you've got on your plate at work and figure out how we can support you to be successful.
Mm. And of course, if you're the business owner, then there's business communities such as ABIC, who are here to support, and that's something that we're very mindful of in times like we're experiencing at the moment. Our facilitators and our team at ABIC are certainly there to support. But more importantly, there's people like yourselves, Fleur, that are actually experts in wellbeing, and you mainly take big corporate groups as well. But can you tell us about some of the areas in which you're perhaps able to support businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of places. And thank you for calling out our business owners because that's where I wanted to go next as well. So
Okay.
as a business owner, if you are noticing that you're starting to feel a little bit wobbly yourself, one of the things I encourage you to do also is not let it run too long without asking for help. So obviously you've got ABIC there in terms of business supports and structures and ideas for help. But the other thing also that you may not realize is that Beyond Blue has got a whole bunch of 24/7 free resources that start from something as simple as being able to do a little bit of a wellbeing diagnostic to work out whether what you're experiencing is like natural everyday stress versus burnout versus potentially, prolonged mental health stress. So you can actually get on and just do a really simple self-diagnostic. The other thing also is there's a whole bunch of fact sheets and different things that are available there that also can help you with ideas and strategies for what to do for yourself, as well as a 24/7 free helpline or a 24/7 free chat line to get you started with some professional recommendations for how you might be able to bolster your own mental health. Now, from my perspective, I do a lot of support and training with mental health conversational skills and also around that, so well-being, stress management, resilience planning. So I've got two books that are both designed to step you through and figure out personal plans for yourself. So Resilience Recipes is for when you're not feeling so great. Leading Wellbeing is for when you are concerned about a staff member and you want a little bit more structure with a step-by-step guide for how these kinds of conversations roll. So both of those are simple, immediate, and cost-effective, cost-effective resources that are easily accessible. One of the other things I'm in the process of developing, so I'll have to let you know when this goes live, is an online course which is called From Stressed to Rest, which actually helps step people through the different stages, of mental health wobbliness and provide different strategies for different parts of what you might be experiencing to support yourself to get back on track.
Right, and I second you there. I think Beyond Blue is a fabulous organisation. I haven't looked at any of their resources for a little while, but I have been through what they have to offer, and there is a really great resource there as well. And in fact, we have one of your resources on the ABIC resource library as well, that you so kindly wrote up for us when we launched all those 3 years ago. So we'll have to refresh on that too.
I'll have to give you some new guides to pop up. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely pop onto the resource channel in the ABIC resource section and add anything that's more relevant and applicable now. So before we close, Fleur, is there any little further pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I guess the last thing I'd like to encourage, particularly our business owners, to think about is that often well-being is something that we consider to be at the end of our to-do list. So when we've got through our work, when our businesses are in a healthy place, when we've dealt with all the fires that are going on and we have a second to breathe, then we can reward ourselves with some time for well-being. But the reality is there is always something that's on our plate. And if we continue to think about well-being or investing in our well-being as a reward for results, then we'll actually never get there. And so what I'd like to leave people with is that we need to flip our well-being equation, because well-being is actually an enabler. So if we invest in our well-being first, so let's go back to the morning routines that we talked about early. If we invest in our well-being first and early and every day, the research and the studies actually show that we increase our performance, our creativity, our ability to problem solve, we improve our relationships, all of these things that are actually going to make us more successful in business, anywhere between 10 and 30%. So if you only take one thing out of our conversation today, put well-being at the beginning, because it will help everything else.
30% return.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, Fleur, thank you so very much for your time today. We've had only touched the surface on a number of things, but it's been a really great start. And I hope that we've sort of enabled some business owners and some therapists in our industry to really focus on themselves, connect to their why, recognize even and when they might be on that slippery slope, and what to do about it. And we're certainly here to help anyone that we can. So thank you very much for your time today, Fleur.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Pleasure.